hip-hop. Why not? All these phony studio gangsters walking around with their gold chains and their own clotheslines, sipping brandy and champagne. And here was 50, living the life for real. But they were getting awards, while he was in danger of being put away for good. So who was the fool? It was time, 50 decided, for a career change. Time to make some real money.
You know, it's weird because I seen Jay 2 days before he got killed. In Chicago, he came to see me. You know, and when he stopped to see me, he was telling me about some film opportunities that he had. And he wanted me to be involved, and I was like, yeah, let's do it, you know?
Like any kid in Queens who was born in the 1970s or after, hip-hop was in 50's blood from day one. It was his culture. The music had been born in his neighbourhood at the block parties and open-air jams where the likes of Grandmaster Flash and Kool Herc had first cut up disco and funk records, mixing them together, scratching and repeating the drum breaks that drove the crowd wild. It was the air that he breathed. It was something that had always been there. And by the time 50 had hit his teens, it had long since gone ballistic on a global scale. This was New York ghetto style that had gone mainstream, which was now all over the airwaves and MTV making serious money. Not that 50 cared about history, all he cared about was carving some kind of future for himself. He'd always been a rapper, always relaxed by freestyling his own rhymes over instrumental tracks at parties and down in friends' basements, chilling and kicking back with a few beers and some weed. But it was when 50 realised that he was about to become a father that he started to get serious about a lot of things. When it was just him, he lived for the moment. If he died, he died. If he went to jail, he'd adapt. But now he was going to have a son to consider, and he wasn't going to abandon his paternal responsibilities like his own father had. 50 wanted to be there for his kid, and not as some jailbird or a gangbanger or an absent memory. He wanted to be someone his son could look up to, who would provide for him and who he could be proud of. And if he was going to raise a family, he knew that it was time to get off the streets. In 1996, 50 Cent had his lucky break when he bumped into Run DMC's DJ Jam Master Jay outside a Manhattan nightclub. Run DMC were some of the original pioneers of hip-hop, and like 50, they were Queens natives. They single-handedly took hip-hop into the mainstream in the mid-80s, with the huge crossover hits My Adidas, Peter Piper, It's Tricky, and especially Walk This Way, their collaboration with the rock group Aerosmith, which revitalised the latter's then dormant career and made Run DMC the first superstars of rap. In no way, shape or form gangster rappers, the group were open about their Christian beliefs. Rapper Run having become a reverend, and in the years following their hits they occupied themselves with local youth and community projects. Yet they remained deathlessly cool, old-school music and fashion icons who uniquely in the hip-hop world no one had a bad word for. Jay was with a mutual friend who introduced 50 as a budding rapper. Fortuitously, Jay was just then in the process of setting up his own label, JMJ Records. He passed 50 a beat tape and challenged him to rap over it. 50 passed the audition with flying colours. Jay liked his rhymes, his humour and his delivery, although it was obvious that he still had no idea how to structure a song or make a piece work musically. Basically, he was raw talent in desperate need of a good editor. Accordingly, Jay signed 50 to his fledgling label and guided him in the studio, teaching him the ropes. 50 had never been behind a microphone before, and while his flow was entirely his, he admits that Jay taught him everything about making it into a commercial piece of music. Together, the pair recorded an album's worth of music, though all that emerged was a fleeting cameo on Onyx's single, All We Got Is Us. Although no records bearing 50 Cent's name were released on JMJ Records, the experience was invaluable. Among other things that 50 learnt from this time was that you've got to keep up a consistent level of quality. On finishing a track that he really thought was the bomb, 50 proudly played it to Jay, only for his mentor to joke, "That's hot, but now we need another one." He knew from experience that once you'd had a hit, you had to keep up the momentum, and that you were only as good as your last record. It wasn't a lesson that 50 could afford to ignore. He knew it was going to be hard work to make it to the top. But once again, as on the streets, he would do whatever it took to survive.
They thought I killed 2 girls from Bricktown because my motorcycle came in the same colors that, the stock colors for a motorcycle, like in every particular year, they all come the same colors. Because mine was the same color as the last guy, they decided to chase me. And then because I ran from them, out of habit, I'm gonna run. I just never see anything positive happen with the police.
In 1998, Run DMC's career was suddenly and unexpectedly revived when Jason Nevin's remix of their early single It's Like That shot to #1. Among other things, this meant that Jam Master Jay no longer had the time and energy necessary to continue guiding 50's career. Both agreed that he needed greater resources than JMJ Records had available in order to nurture his talents. And so, with Jay's assistance, 50 Cent signed with Columbia Sony Records in 1999. They locked him in the recording studio for 3 intense weeks with platinum hitmakers the Trackmasters, a prolonged session that yielded no less than 36 tracks for what should have been 50 Cent's debut major label LP, Power of a Dollar. One track that did emerge from the sessions in early 2000 was the single How to Rob. It quickly achieved notoriety and was widely hailed as an underground classic, mainly for its outrageous lyrics in which 50 bluntly claims that he'll go ahead and literally rob every industry nigger if that's what it takes to make it. Bold and brash, 50 presents himself as just what he is, a thug off the streets who's quite prepared to use physical force to get what he wants. The track isn't afraid to name names either. Mainstream stars like Will Smith and Mariah Carey were targeted and insulted, alongside Puff Daddy, as he was then, the Wu-Tang Clan and Jay-Z. The latter in particular was definitely not amused and responded on one of his tracks with the line, "I'm about $1, what the fuck is 50 Cent?" 50 took the response as a compliment, and it certainly didn't do his profile any harm. For most people, Jay-Z's track was the first time they'd heard 50 Cent's name, and suddenly How to Rob was all over the radio. After all, when a rap heavyweight like Jay-Z takes it upon himself to respond to your diss, then you've arrived. But 50 was unable to capitalise on the song's success. Before his album could be released, he was shot up outside his grandparents' house and was immediately dropped by his label. Heavily bootlegged, Power of a Dollar was acclaimed as a lost classic by Blaze magazine, but this was small consolation to a recovering 50. He was right back where he started from. There was, as always, only one option: to pick himself up and go at it all over again. Some, possibly including Columbia, thought the shooting was the result of the animosity that How to Rob had aroused within the music industry, but 50 knew better. He claimed that his would-be assassins were rival crack dealers from his days on the street, men with a grudge who weren't going to stand by and see him get away from the ghettos where they still languished. "I'm making money," he said. "That bothers a nigger. The people that dislike me have nothing to lose." He knew for a fact that there was at least one contract out on his life, and maybe as many as 3. Where he was from, $5,000 was enough to pay someone to kill a man, and you'd have your choice of people willing and able to do the job. "Might do it for less than that if they like you," 50 commented. In the end, the murder attempt failed, but did change both 50's life and his voice forever. 50 Cent was left with a large hole in the left side of his jaw, with a piece of bullet embedded in his tongue, and had lost both a tooth and a gum. The result was a distinctive slur that soon became his calling card. In addition, once word got out that 50 had been shot so brutally and survived, his legend began to grow. Here was a gangster rapper to end all gangster rappers, a man who literally seemed unstoppable, unkillable, like some mythical folk hero. I wasn't sure if the industry was ever going to embrace me again, he said. But within months he was back, and bigger than ever.
Oh man, I haven't got a chance to really work out since I've been on the promo tour, because it's been so hectic. I probably sleep like 3 hours. I like kind of study. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that lasts a little longer, and I don't have to be anywhere. And then it's like I don't get a chance to go to the gym and actually work out, but I could still do a little something.
Once out of hospital and on the road to recovery, 50 began working out, seriously. He was determined to not only get back to his old strength, but to go further. Before the shooting, he was big, but a touch flabby. A few months afterwards, a tough exercise regime had started to give him the toned, hard musculature that would become as familiar and impressive to a rap audience as his unique voice. However, from the shooting onwards, he was taking no chances with his life and began to wear a bulletproof vest at all times. He admitted that when he was shot, he didn't know how bad it was until afterwards, and that as he lay there in hospital knowing that he'd been abandoned by his record label with all his plans in tatters, what hurt most was not knowing what he was going to do with the life he'd barely managed to cling on to. 50 claims that he isn't scared of dying because it's something that happens to everyone, regardless of the plans you make. If you're scared of dying, you're in denial, he said. But he also feels that if you're shot 9 times at close range and survive, then there must be a reason. That there's a purpose to him still being around, that he's been given a second chance and an opportunity to do something positive with his life. He'd spent his brief tenure on Columbia wisely, not just recording, but sitting in on business meetings and learning as much as he could about marketing, promotion and distribution. Now, left to his own devices, he decided to use the skills he'd developed in recording and pushing his own mixtapes. To this end, he formed his G-Unit production crew, consisting of Lloyd Banks, Tony Yayo and longtime friend and producer Shah Money XL. Together they assembled a series of mixtapes that transcended the usual boundaries of the genre. Normally, these are black market cassettes or CDs that mix together snippets of existing tunes, with an aspiring rapper freestyling over the top. In the case of 50 Cent and G-Unit, the team added their own beats and hooks, as well as raps, completely reworking over 30 original songs. Before the shooting, Columbia had planned to launch 50 directly into the mainstream. He had recorded a guest rap on J-Lo's I'm Gonna Be Alright before being dropped, but he was replaced by Nas on the finished mix. 3 days after he was shot, he was due to have filmed a video for Thug Love featuring Destiny's Child. Now, however, he was gaining a heavy underground reputation, one that would eventually stand him in much better stead than being launched on a wave of major label hype. 50 was steadily building things up, doing it his own way, showing that he could bounce back from anything and that he was as good as anyone out there. 50's tapes were eagerly swapped and bootlegged among the underground hip-hop community, spreading from New York to LA, London and beyond. The buzz was there. Now 50 Cent needed a real album of his own, and rather than wait for another big record company to come around, he decided to make it himself.
I didn't actually anticipate being the number one artist, but I felt like I would have some success in music. Like I had to market myself. Yeah. After being dropped from Columbia, I was in a situation where I was just out there.
Drawing on the best of their homemade mixtapes, 50 Cent and G-Unit put together the Guess Who's Back album and released it on their own Full Clip Records in spring 2001. The CD opens with a rhymed resume of 50's life so far, and a promise that the material that his fans knew from the mixtapes was only the beginning. Rotten Apple challenges the likes of Nelly and other southern rappers then in vogue, claiming that 50's going to show them how it's done in New York.